Hi there and welcome to the Labyrinth. If you're a first-time visitor, thank you for joining us. If you're a returning visitor, thank you very much again for continuing to be part of my journey. Today we're going to be talking about name numerology, which is actually a really interesting activity or exercise to do if you haven't done it before. I find it to be anyway. And I'm going to outline to you the exact process and what the implications are of the names. Now, we've already completed the ruling numbers, we've already completed the day numbers, and this is all very important to creating a full picture of personality and the way we should be picking our names, I guess, or picking names for our children. The thing is, though, what I have done in error is actually really we should be looking at the birth chart before we look at names. But the bottom line is this is one part of the series, and you're going to have an opportunity to come back and review this after we do the birth chart. So it's just one step of the process. It's not everything, but it does help. The reason why we would normally be looking at the naming numerology after looking at the other aspects is because the name is, or the idea behind the naming numerology is to balance the inner and outer personality traits. So when we look at the ruling number, the day number, and the birth chart, we're going to see a whole variation and string of influences of personality strengths and vulnerabilities. So, for instance, if we were to look at the birth chart, which that will be the next series, we're going to see things like if there's arrows on there and what those arrows mean. And we might see common threads here with the sun sign and the birthday that all are strong. This is as a prime example, and very little emotional reflection or capacity to process emotions within all of these factors. Okay, so you would, if you're picking a name, you would be advised and encouraged to pick a name that will balance and soften some of the harsher or more materialist edges, if that's what we're referring to. Or if the person has got this underlying thread of all in the mind, overthinking and all of that kind of stuff, then you would try and give them a name that is more grounded and more practical, because the idea is that as a rounded person, we want to have balance as we go ahead throughout the life path, because obviously where there's balance, we will have a successful, prosperous, joyous life. You know what I mean? Mind, body, spirit. And this is what we're aiming to support with the names. So before we go any further, I just wanted to show you this table, and it will be in the video description. I'll have a link to this to make it easy for you to come back and forth to. Okay, each letter of the alphabet is associated with a specific number. Now, you could copy the chart if you want, or you could just remember the fact that letters are associated with 1 to 9 if we're trying to do a calculation. And so there's 25 letters in the alphabet. The 9th letter, the 18th letter, they are going to have the value of 9. The 1st, 10th, and 19th letter, they're going to have the value of 1, for example. So you can see here clearly each name, each letter that's associated with each value. It is very important that you use, when you're doing name numerology, that you do the numerology on the name that is in use, because it is only the name that is in use that carries vibration. So, for example, if your name is Jennifer and people call you Jenny, and everybody calls you Jenny, then you would do your numerology on the name Jenny. If you've got a nickname or a pet name, I don't know why, but I had one auntie, for example, who throughout the entirety of her life, she was referred to by everybody as Bubba. It was a name that stuck with her from childhood, because she was the last baby to be born. So even as an adult, apparently they called her Bubba. So you would do numerology in her instance as Bubba. I also knew a guy who was a redhead in Australia. Even his wife called him Blue. You would do the name numerology on Blue. If you were going to do the name that a person was born with, that is on their birth certificate, that would just purely be an academic exercise to see what they were born with, because realistically, Actually, I'll explain this on the next slide with the extra information. The reason using the birth name that's on the birth certificate, if it's not the name that's in use currently in the present time frame, is because there is no accident with the selection of a name of a child by a parent, okay? And apparently or accordingly, it is during the childhood and adolescent years that it's easier to see how the person's birth name or the name that they're known by actually influences the way they behave and that kind of thing. So it definitely is an academic exercise if that name's no longer in use. Now, important factors with regard to analysing names is it is culturally transferable, it's relatable, because of course at the end of the day numerology has always been intercultural, okay? The same principles will apply interculturally as well, and that is that you use the name that your family and friends call you. So in the Western context, we're talking about the first name or the Christian name. And the reason why we would use the first name is because this is what really refers to the personality, and this has got the most vibration because it's actively used. Very rarely does a person turn around and say, hello, I am, and use first and surname. Sometimes people will use the surname or the family name in a business setting. You could do an analysis of that just for the sake of it. The other important factor is too, when it comes to doing the analysis, if a person doesn't use their names at all, but instead identifies with, I'm trying to think of the word, right? It could be the initials. Like in the US, it's very popular for people to be known as Junior or JB or whatever. Those are the names that you would do the analysis on because they're the names that are in use. I'm giving you the information here about a complete name, which this is you could do numerology as an exercise on the person's first and family names, and that becomes the complete name. But rarely ever, if ever, I would say, does a person use both of those names in any given setting. So it's unlikely that there's going to be any real value to doing that as an activity. It would just be a fun thing to do, but you can do it. So just some extra information here, and for a little bit of added complexity, the letter Y, of course, is neither, certainly in the English language, it is neither a vowel nor a consonant. But for the purposes of doing name numerology, it actually shifts from vowel to consonant depending on the naming style. So, for example, names as listed here, Lynn, Bryn, Hind, Kid, Bird, Lynch, they will all be calculated as a vowel because there are no vowels in the name. And so it's apparently, if it sounds a bit like an I or replaces the vowel I or replaces the vowel E, then it is read as a vowel. Only when there's no other vowels in the name, okay? Now, it is read as a consonant for names such as Jay, Brian, Kelly, Sally, and Shirley, and this is because they have other vowels in there. So just to remind you, just to summarize it, Y is a vowel or calculated as a vowel when there are no other vowels in the name. It is calculated as a consonant when there are other vowels in the name. Hope that makes sense to you. So I'll show you how to calculate out both the soul or inner expression and the outer expression in a moment, which gives you the insight and the power and the magic of the numbers. But before we go there, I just thought I should explain, when we're talking about the soul urge or the inner expression, it's basically that burning desire within us that we don't necessarily show to other people. It talks about our spiritual sensitivities, strength, motivation, drive, our feelings, our emotions. It's all that internal stuff that if we were talking about the friendship circles, which of course we've got that video up, it would be the stuff that we don't expose to anybody unless they're actually inside of our inner sanctum, and that could be nobody at all. The outer expression, of course, is the way we act in our place in the world, what other people might notice and observe about us. It's our behaviours. Basically, it is visible stuff. And that has relevance as well, because when we talk about associated behaviors and the energy that's with each number, much later in this video, I will be showing you why it's important. But for now, this is about getting the understanding and insight into what can be demonstrated through the inner and outer expression. So I've decided to use a name with a Y in it, and where the Y is calculated as a consonant. Okay, so I'm using the name Shirley. As you can see here, I've written it out in such a way that you can see that all the vowels are added at the top. They are the soul urge, or the inner expression, and the sum of the total of the soul urge here is the number 5. The sum of the outer expression is the 28, which comes to 10. So I tend to put them on different planes because I think it's easier to identify what's what. To put this into perspective, the soul urge, if we were talking about friendship circles, as I think I said it before, I'm not sure, I'm losing track of myself, but basically that would be what we call the inner sanctum. Not everybody's necessarily going to see that aspect of ourselves, but definitely people will visibly observe and notice our outer expression. Now, in the slides that are coming up, what I've done is I have just, to assist you, to make it easier for you, for each number, so I've got the numbers from 1 to 22 that are relevant, and I've put on there the details so that, let's say, just to make it easier for you, you will see on each slide that every slide has got the content that relates to the inner expression and the outer expression. And I've also put on there what numbers apply and what don't, to make it easier for you. So let's take a look now at number 1 and see what I mean. So you see here that where it's not possible to have a ruling number of 1, you can as a soul urge or as an outer expression. Now, with the soul urge, if a person's got a soul urge of 1, it can only actually be achieved if there is a singular vowel of A in the name, and if we're talking Western names such as Jack, okay? And what these people need, or their soul urge desire, their whole yearning, would be for the capacity to have artistic expression, because they tend to feel confined as far as personal expression goes. And by that I mean that they struggle to actually be able to speak and demonstrate what their feelings are. So by pursuing an artistic activity, this allows them a form of release. Now, as far as an outward expression goes, once again, independence is the key thing here for them. They are best suited to solo activities, and if they're into sports, solo sports activities. They wouldn't tend to perform well in an office type environment because they would feel trapped. So they do well working from home or having flexibility of their work hours and conditions, and they would be encouraged to pursue, as part of that balance, some physical pursuits outside of work. So people with a soul urge of 2, of course, this is where the sum of the vowels equals 2 or 20. They seek a balance across their lifestyle. They have this burning desire or need for a harmonious environment, to be able to interact and communicate with people in harmonious, peaceful ways. They're very intuitive. They have a preference for a natural environment rather than superficial. They do have an expectation that other people treat them the same way that they treat them, and because fairness and balance is part of them, it really does, I guess, embrace that mindset of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. As far as outer expression goes, these people tend to be team players. They enjoy working in a group. They like that group, obviously, to be fun-seeking, happy and joyful, because for them it's all about the interaction, and when they're in the right environment, they're going to be performing at their best. A soul urge of 3 is where the vowels equal 3, 12 or 21. And they are obviously focused on thoughts, the power of the mind. They're very good at rationalizing and processing their emotions, as well as ideas and thoughts. And this is a real gift to them because they are able to make really good appraisals and assessments of people and situations. Now, when it comes to the outer expression, of course, this is the sum of the consonants, and you can see there's a variation here. We have 3, 12, 21, or 30. The 30 comes into play with the outward expression. And this is because when we've got a ruling number of 3, for example, or the vibration of the 3 is this really fun aspect. They've got the quick wit. They are not worried about being the life of the party. They enjoy entertaining people. And they definitely all round have a very positive outlook on life. And once again, that, goodness me, what is the word? It escapes me. That joy, fun-loving aspect is very attractive and charismatic to other people. So a soul urge of 4 is obtained by the sum of the vowels of 4 or 13. And people with this soul urge tend to have a desire, basically, I guess, for stability, routine, and that kind of thing. They tend to be quite conservative in their opinions, and they can take an orthodox approach to life. So perhaps life can be a bit turbulent on the external for them because there is this inner desire to have this regular routine. They're not generally prone to emotional or reactive outbursts. Now, for the outer expression, of course, the variation is that it's the sum of the consonants, and they must total 4, 13, or 31. And people born with this expression, they tend to be the doers. They're the walkers. They're not the talkers. They like to be very practical. They like to work manually with their bodies, their hands, or their feet. And they tend to be very good at crafts or even doing sports as well. So, at best of times, the 5 refers to deep feelings and emotional strength. So, for a soul urge of 5, it's the sum, obviously, of the vowels that equals 5 or 14. And this is with the deep feelings, the emotional strength, that inner need for freedom and to be accepted for who and what they are. They do have this yearning, burning to be able to express these strong feelings. And unless they have their birth chart carrying freedom of expression, such as an arrow of sensitivity, it's going to be a little bit difficult for them. As far as the outward expression of the 5 goes, this is the sum of the consonants 5, 14, 23, or 32. Now, once again, we're seeing here a desire for physical space where people would feel trapped in an office type environment. They need to be surrounded by responsive people who lack inhibition, who don't try and repress their emotions. And this is because they may often experience feelings of being misunderstood because they're struggling to obviously articulate what it is they feel inside of themselves. Or, sometimes this lack of expression is not just because they're withholding, but perhaps they lack confidence or they're a bit too shy to actually say what they feel and mean. So when they're around other people who aren't inhibited and who don't take offence easily, they can be free to be who and what they are. And the alternative is that they can become very frustrated if they have to keep suppressing themselves to accommodate other people's emotional needs. Yeah, if they can't have that honest communication, it can be very problematic for them. So people with a soul urge of 6, they're going to be where the vowels add up to a total of 6 or 15. And these people have got a desire, that, inner urge to be able to express love, creativity and care. Now, if this becomes blocked, it can manifest as anxiety and depressive type disorders. And by blocked, I mean this can be due to family breakdown or whatever, where there is a desire by the person to be able to show love or exhibit love to people who are not receptive to receiving it. So we're talking about this really yearning, burning aspect of giving of love. When it comes to the outer expression of the 6, this is the total sum of the consonants that equals 6, 15, 24, or 33. Now, these people will focus most of their energy on the home. Even if they're working and that kind of stuff, the home is very important to them. They need to apply balance and ensure that they don't overindulge on the domestic stuff, or even family, actually, because they might have tendencies to sacrifice their own happiness, health and care as part of accommodating the needs of the other family members. Now, the problem with this is not only that it becomes self-sacrificing, it also can impede and block the other family members, especially if we're talking about children, from their own self-growth and independence, and that's through that over-pampering. So we probably would call them helicopter mothers in this day and age, or helicopter fathers even. So the sole urge of the 7 is the calculation of the vowels to the number 7 or 16, and they've got this innate inburning desire to support people, to teach or help and motivate others. It becomes a driving force. Once again, that business of not being particularly receptive to receiving advice would be there as a burning desire as well. So if somebody's trying to tell them what to do, there will be this inner rebel that's going on. Even if they're not showing it, it would be inside saying, I learn my own way. I learn best when I learn myself. And part of this growth is, of course, that they have to get to that point where they understand that we're all perpetual teachers and students. We all are doing the same. And, this brings to mind the saying that I repeatedly say, which is, for every student I've ever taught, I have learned a multitude. When it comes to the outward expression of the 7, of course, once again, this business of not taking advice well is there, and it will be overt, you'll see it. I don't think they would particularly hide it. They don't take advice very well. They must learn their own way and based on the lessons of experience. And part of this is not just because of a tendency or a desire of arrogance. It's not rooted in arrogance, I must say, or I don't believe very often. It's more about the fact that as they learn and establish for themselves based on that lived experience of learning, they gain a real sense of personal achievement and satisfaction by doing it their own way and by discovering that self-discovery that is very emotionally rewarding to them. So this is far more overt with people with an outer expression of the 7. The sole urge of 8 is one where the sum of the vowels is 8 or 17, and these people have that inner desire, once again, for independence. We've got individual expression here. There can be a desire to dissociate from people or from events or incidents or whatever which they believe to be unconventional or illogical. Their lesson in life is to participate in life without feeling trapped and bound, and at times this may translate. So this is a word of advice to people who've got that soul urge of being that independent. And perhaps they can appear to be arrogant and aloof to people because of this dissociation from the unconventional, I guess. I wouldn't say it go as far as saying closed-minded, because they're not closed-minded. They just are very practical thinkers. As far as the outward expression goes, of course, that's the sum of the consonants 8, 17, 26 or 35. Once again, independence is an overarching factor or energy of the number. But the difference is that with these people, they're not too scared to be different. They will dare to be different, and they will assert their strong personalities. And not only that, they understand that personal and self-development means thinking outside of the box. So they have a confidence about them. So for people with the soul of an urge of a 9, you can only have one way of getting it, and that is through the 9. Now, just a reminder that the energy of the 9 is one of the humanitarian ideals, and this once again shows in the soul urge. So even if they're not actively doing it within their physical existence, there would be this inner desire that says, I really want to be able to help people, and where they carry a certain sense of responsibility. It could be a case of saying, we as members of society all have a responsibility to care for the vulnerable or whatever. There is also a spin-off with this number that they can become overly ambitious or overly idealistic, and it can lend itself to being a little bit egocentric, shall we say. There is a reminder, though, for these people, because they have such a humanitarian idealism about them. The reminder is, and I've got to convey this correctly, that the power of this number actually means that if they truly want to do well, at these goals that they set themselves, they have to have a level of emotional detachment, because when you or when we are so fixated on the goals, it can actually blind us and cloud our judgment. And the other thing is, particularly with a 9, if they're focused too heavily on the outcomes, they can be locked into that entire process rather of building the vision, and then it makes all the ventures that they endeavour, that will become burdensome for them. So there has to be that real balance to their approach as well. Now, as far as the outward expression goes, of course, this is the sum of the consonants that equals 9, 18, 27 and 36. And these people, you're going to observe them where they tend to lose themselves more into the serious aspects of life. And because they're so focused on the serious stuff, if they're not careful, it can take them down a pathway of sadness and loneliness. They do hold great potential for very deep contemplation and reflection, and this leads to this great expansion of the mind and a real understanding of life. And the advice for them is they must balance this contemplation, awareness and thought with pleasurable experiences, and to include light and fun and joy in their daily living. Because if they don't, the reality is, and we know this, if people get too bound up in the worries of life and living, then it's going to impact negatively on the social, emotional and physical health aspects. So they are really strongly guided to get a balance in their life. A soul urge of 10 can only be obtained when the sum of the vowels is the number 10. There's no other way to have it. And for these people, there is this inner burning desire to implement all the opportunities to use their psychic gifts, such as the clairs, or if they learn about astral projection. And this is all part of a means for them to gain that freedom that is necessary for them, because they most likely are living in a world where limitations are placed upon them, and that stifles their ability to express who they are. So the advice would be that yes, they should harness these powers, because out of that they can support growth not only of themselves, and I'm talking about the expansion of the soul, but also for the people around them. By using the gifts that are bestowed upon them, they liberate themselves from this earthbound state, and they bring that awareness of divinity and essence, the divine essence, to everybody. And that would certainly be encouraged, when we talk about the brotherhood and sisterhood of mankind. Now, in regard to the outer expression, what we're going to be able to observe and see with our eyes for people who've got an out expression of 10, they can only, this can only be achieved when the sum of the consonants is 10, 19, 28 or 37. Now, these people are very social, very adaptable. They can adjust well to life changes, and they have this capacity to maintain a balanced perspective, and not only do they see opportunities, they're able to grasp them and use them. There is advice, of course, that they should avoid too much flippancy, because if they focus on the superficial, obviously that's going to potentially undermine any success they might have. It also distracts them from achieving their goals. What else? And also they could neglect their responsibilities because they're so busy having a good time. So a soul urge of 11 can only be obtained if the sum of the vowels reaches 11. There's only one way to get it. It is a master number, and it offers a really valuable intuitive strength, and it will balance the person, particularly if they lack intuitive gifts, or if there's an absence on the spiritual plane on their birth chart. It will assist with increasing the ability to have compassion for others, and it enables the person to be more sensitive to other people's feelings. So yes, if you've got a highly materialistic birth chart and no numbers on the spiritual feelings plane, it would be really good to make a name that has the soul urge, or at least the outward expression of being an 11. So speaking of the outward expression, there's two ways to get the outward expression for the Master 11, and that's the sum of the consonants to the numbers 11 or 29. And this reflects the balance of spiritual and emotional expression. We're going to actually see that it will be observable that not only are they feeling people and caring people and compassionate, but they actually act in this way as well. There's this desire to instill harmony into the environment and the people within it, and they would exhibit emotional control and a heightened understanding of life, of course, and the process of it. However, it is only when the individual with this expression is allowed to walk this path, demonstrating their care and the balance, that they will find this inner happiness within that they're seeking. So in regard to the number 22, of course, that's a master as well as the 11, but you can only get a 22 as an outward expression, and this is when the consonants equal 22, and these will be the observable traits of a person. Now, what I find really quite funny is, of course, I have somebody in Italy that's helping me, and doing this exercise, of course, I observed that honestly, this just speaks to this person completely as far as their behaviours go. So this is what I talk about, the power and the magic of actual names. So what we notice with people with the outward expression of a 22 is they do have exceptional organisational abilities, and that does bode very well for them in business and commercial enterprises, because it makes them trustworthy, reliable, and we know that they're going to fulfil their obligations because there's that consistency there. If they were to have a ruling number, say here as well, combined with the name numerology, then there is a risk that they could become obsessive about money and business, and they would need to take extra care that they keep a balance there. And the way they would get around that is by setting some time aside for charity and volunteer activities. And that volunteer activity could be something working with animals or children or environmental, and it doesn't actually have to be hands-on. It can actually be sitting on a board or taking a managerial type or a leadership type role, shall we say, as an advisor. So I'm going to keep talking fast to keep the pace going and try and get through this in a timely way. Okay, when we're looking at the parental advice to, people that are expecting a baby or whatever, the idea would be to create a list of names before the birth and to avoid picking the name until after the baby is born. And this is because we can't actually really do a comparison against the natal charts, obviously, until the baby's born, and this is things like the ruling number, the day number, the birth chart, whether it's got absent numbers, multiple numbers, any arrows, right? So the other advice is avoid shortlisting names you don't like, or use them as a second name if they're inherited. So for instance, if your partner turns around and says, I really want the baby to carry my grandfather's name or my grandmother's, and you really dislike that name, then don't put that as the baby's first name, because without saying you're not going to actually use it. You will probably give them a nickname. So use it as a second name. And also, if you're going to pick a name, be aware that names have vibration because they're actually used. So you would give them the name that you're intending to be used by them. But of course, well, I sort of said earlier, if the baby's name is shortened down to a nickname or a pet name or abbreviated, that's the one that you're going to do the numerology on. So the other thing is too, if you're a parent and you're having a child, expecting a child, be prepared to use the complete name, the whole name, okay? And I just want to clarify there, complete name, that's talking about the surname as well. But where I'm going with this is, if you're planning to call your baby Jenny, call your baby Jenny. Don't call her Jennifer. Or if you're going to call her Jennifer, do your numerology on Jenny, because that's the name you're going to use for the baby, and that's the one you want to have the vibration correct with, the natal content, if that makes sense. If you've got questions, leave a comment and I'll answer them. So people can change a name for a number of reasons, okay? And the most common one that we're aware of, we see it done for professional reasons. And whatever name changes or whatever our motivations are to change our names, it's actually not going to change the vibration of our life path, but it will change in a small way the energy around our personality, okay? Now, if somebody changes their name for professional reasons, we're going to have a look at this in a minute. Generally what happens is that it is an inhibition that is removed that allows the person to express. So we're talking probably more so about the outward expression than anything else. Simply by adopting the new name, there becomes a shift, a release that is associated. So that's a positive there. Okay. An interesting observation, one that has been made by Dr. David Phillips back in the 1980s, was despite, in his opinion, the fact that there's no real reason for a woman to be adopting the surname of her husband, in modern times, beyond the fact that it's actually tradition. It was in his observations that people could live together in harmony without any issues, and then they would marry and the woman would change her name to adopt the husband's. Now, his position was that sometimes this would result in tensions because the surnames of both parties aligning together changes the entire vibration of the relationship, marriage. But bearing in mind also, of course, sometimes this actually works for the positive too. Sometimes it actually brings people closer together. So what we're looking at here is basically, I've slapped it all on the one slide. I know it's intense, but it's to show you what we actually need to consider when we're picking the name. And of course, we haven't done this content yet. We're going on to birth charts very soon. And then after that, we'll be looking at pyramids, right? Arrows are part of the birth chart. But anyway, when we have a look at Freddie Mercury, we can see that he actually was born Farrokh. I can't remember his surname that he was born with, but he changed his name to Freddie Mercury for professional reasons, which is understandable. But I'm not going to worry about the name stuff first, because the name is what we would normally look at after we've looked at the implications of everything else on his natal chart. And I have forgotten to put down, if he was born on September 5th, he's a Virgo, so there is that perfectionist element to him. He's got repetitions of 7s and 5s. Actually, I shouldn't say... Look, actually, not at this point. I'll pace myself. He has got a ruling number of 7, which includes that desire to learn his own way. Nobody's going to be able to tell him how to do it because he has to learn from his own experiences. He's got that day number of 5, which is the real suppression of emotions and feelings. I mean, he would probably have been very passionate. In fact, actually, what we know about him, he definitely was. But then he's got that soul urge of 10, this desire to be free as well, to express himself. So he's got that spin there. He's got this day number, which is saying basically he struggles to express himself. So obviously music was a release for him to be able to do that personal expression. Then what have we got here? When we look at his birth chart, and I'm not going to go into this too far because it can be quite complex, we would take into account what numbers are missing, what's absent, what are his multiple numbers. He's got 2 9s on his birth chart. We see that he has got a balance across the feelings and doing stuff. So actually there's frustration there in his mind, actually. So when we look at the mind plane, he's actually quite home oriented. He really had that desire for love, is something that would have been foremost on his mind. And actually we know that when we look at his life and we translate it over to what we're seeing on the chart, we know that that was there. And then when we look at his pyramids, okay, I'm not going to go too far into it. I'm just going to say we were all robbed, okay? The fact that he died early, we were all robbed because he was really coming into his own. The 10 influenced him, that soul urge will... actually, so let me put this into place. He changed his name from Farrokh. The Farrokh name had the soul urge of a 7, but when he changed his name to Freddie, he has liberated himself to do all that fun stuff that, became the desire and focus for him. So even a little bit Machiavellian, if you like. And obviously he became unwell. That became the focus of his attention. There is so much I could say when I look at all of this here, but I'm not going to, because I just don't have time to anyway. But you can see that there are some variations there. Farrokh carried, as a name, it carried the balanced soul and outer expression. But when he's picked Freddie, he's created this desire for party, if you like, and socializing, and lost sight of his responsibilities. But at the same time, it's impeded his capacity to balance and translate his emotions through to other people. This is basically created a situation where he's been quite reactive. Now, what I think is tragic when I look at his pyramid here is that we can actually see his first peak of success was in actually I don't know what year it was, but that stands to reason it would have been about 1975. According to this, 1984 was another big year for him. I'm just going to do a quick Google and come back. I just wanted to check his second peak in life was supposed to be 1984. Well, actually, I would say it was probably, oh, you know what? That does make sense, actually, because 7 actually does include a bit of sacrifice, and he was in a really bad space apparently in 1984. And it was 1985 that I would say would have been his peak achievement year, because that was when he did Live Aid and he was actually sick at the time. Where I say we were robbed is by 1993, had he lived, because obviously he passed away in 1992, he was coming into another peak year where we would have seen him come back into the joy of life, if you like, because he went into a dark space for a while, and also because he has a Master 11 there. Had he survived, oh my goodness me. So, I mean, it's tragic for all of us. It was tragic for him. But I think when we look at the birth chart here and we see he had the arrow of willpower and determination, he was always going to succeed at whatever life threw at him, which is incredible. But anyway, this is what you would be looking at when you were picking your names. You would be looking at all of these things together. Anyway, moving on because the video is getting very long. So just quickly, next week we're going to start looking at the birth chart, and hopefully I will get it all covered, even if it's another long one, in as far as the mind, body, spirit planes and the meaning of multiple and absent numbers on the chart. I really can't see that we're going to be able to get all the arrows into that video, because that can be quite a long process anyway. There's a lot of arrows involved. And then once I've completed that, then we're going to start looking at how to do the pyramids. I'll show you how to do the pyramids, because they're interesting and fun too. So that being said, I would like to thank you very much for being part of my journey once again. I hope you've managed to gain something of interest today, that you've learned something, that it's fun, at least, if nothing else. I wish you a wonderful week, and I will catch you on the next video. Take care for now. Bye-bye.